Stay focused, we got this. Now, where do we go from here? Now, very simply, we are at all-time highs, isn't it? And how did we get here? May 27th, I talked about a very strong liquidity at 612, and then we built liquidity all the way there. And there was negative news that started revisiting the 20-day moving average. And I said, the crash is not here yet. This just happens once a month, and you see it again. That we visited our 20-day moving average once a month, and that's exactly what happened. And you see thereafter that we started pushing up all the way now at all-time highs. Now, let me remind you that beautiful trade on Monday right here. Once we identified the blue algorithm and the 20-day moving average, you see how the market grabbed the liquidity so beautifully, and also in that strongest precision algorithm right there to the penny once again. And you see how beautiful that structure is, reclaiming the 20-day moving average like it's nothing. Now, you cannot be like most retailers and tell yourself, this is too high, this is too low, something's got to happen. Now, I tell you, the market will always trend up unless there is a negative catalyst, and there are several trend indicators to also support that. Whenever we are at all-time highs, I want you to see, whenever we registered all-time highs, there will always be certain things that happen. When we got to the high here, you see there is a certain pullback, isn't it? I will show you how to be looking out for the pullback, right? We got the highs here again, but we started trending up, and then we got the highs here. We had a slight pullback. We got another high here. We started having a stronger pullback here before we registered another high here. A little pullback again, another high, slight pullback, another high, back to the pullback again. And we got to this high, a larger pullback, this one all the way down. And then we went back to the high as we are at today now. So when we get to the highs, there will be two things that happen. We will continue trending up and to build more liquidity before we start to have a pullback. The pullback will always happen, but you need to be careful about shorting this early, because you have to take a look. The pullbacks will not always be below the previous high, right? We had that pullback here. This was above the previous high. The pullback here was above the previous high. The pullback here, this one is a little further down, but you see the pullbacks will always be in some way close to where the previous high is. So if you start to short this too early, you will be in trouble. Now, I will show you, very importantly, what to be looking out for here. As you see it retest the upper Bollinger, always, as I always mention, if it retests the upper Bollinger here, if it continues trending up with the 5-day moving average, that's where it will build the liquidity. And once a month, it will retest the 20-day moving average. On average, once a month, but it's about there. And you see if it starts to trend up, it will always trend up together with the 5-day moving average, building liquidity, as well as the 20-day moving average, retesting it once a month. So you have to be looking out for the 5-day and the 20-day moving average. If 5-day moving average continues to trend up with the upper Bollinger that's trending up, this will continue to build liquidity for the move up here. And that's because they're trapping as many shorts as it can, giving it its liquidity to head up right there. When does it head down? You notice whenever it heads down, it's always 5-day crossing below 20-day moving average. It's always the case, 100% of the time. This is when you know there will be a pullback. So you just have to be more careful here. Now take a look at this again. Back then this was a high. When does the pullback happen? Once the 5-day crosses below the 20-day moving average right there. Now here again, when's the pullback? When the 5-day starts to trend below the 20-day moving average right there. So pay close attention to that. And therefore, this was very important information once I talked about that 612, about 27th May, if I'm not wrong. I talked about 612 right here. And there was no reason to dump this. I kept saying if it wants to dump, you will not miss it, because you don't see the 5-day crossing below the 20-day moving average. This was the only time, the closest that it got. And I reminded you this happens once a month. So don't be too bearish right now at this point here. Now you have to be extremely careful and the pullback will come. It certainly will come, especially when the bottom Bollinger is pretty high up here where the major liquidity is. So the bears and the bulls will be interested to want to retest for more liquidity.